Okay, good morning, everybody. We are starting today from Daf Chavav Amud Beis 26b, about halfway down the page, Torah Rabbanan, and we're going to start talking about what's called Tashmishe Mitzvah, objects that have been used for the performance of a mitzvah. So it says the Gemara, Torah Rabbanan, it was taught by the rabbis in the Brisa, Tashmishe Mitzvah, objects that were used for the performance of a mitzvah. We're going to give examples of what they are. But first, we learn nizrakin. They can be discarded because these objects don't have any sanctity in and of themselves. So therefore, after their use, one can discard them. Tashmishe kedusha, however, objects which are accessories to something which is actually holy, nignazin, they have to be buried, they have to be hidden in a safe place, and they cannot be used for anything else. Okay. So now, the Gemara goes on to say, ve'elu hein tashmishe mitzvah. These are the objects that are used for a mitzvah. In other words, what are tashmishe mitzvah? So he gives us an example, sukkah. So we're talking about the wood panels that are used to build a sukkah. So after sukkahs, what's the story with these panels, right? So we're saying this is what's called a tashmishe mitzvah, an object used for a mitzvah, but itself, after sukkahs, has no sanctity. Lulav, likewise, is the palm branch, right? We use for a lulav, shofar, and tzitzis. All of these objects, they can be discarded after the mitzvah has been performed. And these are the objects which are considered to be tashmishe kedusha. They're used for sacred objects, right? For example, luskimei sfarim, tefillin, umzuzos, sacks that are used for sacred books, or for tefillin, or for mitzvahs, right? For mezuzos. The tik shall say v'teira, and a case for a Torah scroll, v'nartik shall tefillin, and a case for tefillin, v'rtuosein, and their straps. These things, although they aren't directly a Sefer Torah, they're not a mezuzah, they're not tefillin, but these are cases and bags that are used for these holy objects. So they themselves are considered to be tashmishe kedusha, accessories for kedusha. And so therefore you cannot just discard of them and do as you will with them. You have to bury them, you have to deal with them respectfully. So just before we go any further, I just wanted to bring from Shulchan Aruch, okay, with regards to tzitzis, right, for example, right? We just said that what do you do with things that are tashmishe mitzvah? So for example, tzitzis that have become no longer usable, right? So what are you supposed to do with them? So here we're going to read what it says. Tzitzis strings that attached may be thrown into the garbage because it is a mitzvah that does not possess its holiness, meaning tzitzis are only a mitzvah by virtue of them being attached to a four-cornered garment. However, as long as they are attached to a talis, in other words, if they're still attached, they're not detached. If they're still attached, it's forbidden to use them for another purpose, like to tie something with them or similar, because this is disrespectful to the mitzvah. But then there's the note of the Ramah. That's from the Mechaber. That's from the compiler of the Shulchan Aruch. But we know that you have the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, who was the codifier and decider and the halakhic authority for the Ashkenazim Jews. So he says there are those who say that even after they've become detached, one should not treat them disrespectfully by throwing them into a dirty place, but they don't need to be ritually buried, right? And there are those who are punctilious, means they're very careful to ritually bury them. And for the one who is stringent and careful in the performance of mitzvahs, a blessing shall come upon him. Which means to say that although by the strict halacha, these tzitzis no longer have any holiness, right? These strings, because they've become detached, they no longer have any holiness, but nevertheless, because they were once used for a mitzvah, if you want to be extra careful with the mitzvahs, then you won't just discard of them, but you will bury them in a respectful manner. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, why is it that the teva that is holding the Torahs, you can change it if you don't use it anymore as a teva, you can change it to a small cabinet or something?
We haven't done that yet. We're coming to it.
No, we did. I thought we studied it before, no?
No.
Maybe
no.
I just read ahead. I don't know.
You read ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
I wanted to compare it to the sukkah. Why is the sukkah not?
No. So
holy?
Okay. Ben, you can't read ahead.
Huh?
Sorry,
You can't read
did it
ahead.
last night.
That's not allowed.
Okay.
So continue on. For those who just joined, we're holding Daf Chavav on base 26b in the R scroll is 26b2, and we're holding by Amma Rava, the last paragraph on 26b2. Amma Rava said, Mereish, at first, Hava Amina, I thought, Hi Kursaya, this bima that upon which they used to read the Torah scroll, right? Tashmish the tashmishu. It's an accessory of an accessory. Vashari, and therefore it's permissible to use it for non-sacred purposes. Why? Because people never used to put the Sefer Torah directly on the bima. They would cover it with a special cover, like a paroiches kind of cover, like a velvet cover, some kind of cover over this bima, over this table, right, that they would use, and they put the Sefer Torah on the cover. So therefore, Rava says to begin with, I saw the table as an accessory to an accessory, because something was put on it and the Torah was put only on the thing which was upon the bima. So therefore, the bima itself may not be a direct accessory. So, Kiv the Chazina, once I saw the Meisve Alvoi Sefer Torah, that there were times where they would put the Sefer Torah directly on it without the cover. So then, Amina, and I said that Tashmishi Kedushahu, that it itself is an accessory for sacred items, and therefore, also you cannot use it for anything you want. It can only be used for Kedusha. Okay, a second ruling by Rava on this topic. Rava also said, Mereish, in the beginning, Hava Amina, I assume, High Prisa, Tashmish the Tashmishu. This curtain, so there's a machlekes between Rashi and Tosfos, whether this was referring to the curtain that's outside the Aron HaKodesh, outside the ark, or inside the ark. But either way, Rava thought that this particular curtain was an accessory to an accessory, because the curtain's purpose is only to protect and adorn the ark, which itself is an accessory to the Sefer Torah. So therefore, perhaps the curtain could be used for other things. But given the Chazina, the Eifile, Umanche Sifra Avoy, because since I observed that sometimes they bend the curtain under and they place the Torah scroll directly on it for some, I guess, in some manner, the way they used to use it in those days was they could use this particular cover and somehow wrap the Torah in it, or use it for some kind of protection directly, not for the ark, but for the Torah itself. So Amina said, then I said, Tashmish Kedushu, this is actually an accessory for a sacred item, but also, and you cannot use it for non-sacred things. You have to use it only for Kedusha. Okay, so now, Ma'amar third ruling, Hai Tevusa, the earpot, an ark used to hold the Torah that fell apart, which means to say it's an Aron HaKodesh that's no longer usable. You can't use the Aron HaKodesh anymore, right? So what can you do with that Aron HaKodesh? Of the Teva Zutrasti Shari, to make a small ark out of it is permissible. You could take the Aron HaKodesh and you can make it into a smaller Aron. However, Kursaya Osir, but to make it into a bima, that you can't, because the same principle that we've been using up until now is Mailim Bakodesh. We always go up in levels of Kedusha, we never go down. And because an Aron HaKodesh has greater sanctity than the bima, so therefore you cannot take the ark and make it into a bima, but you can take the leftovers of this ark and build a smaller ark, right? You can take the wood or whatever was used to make the ark, and you can make it into a smaller ark. Okay, so now, then You asked a question.
Yeah, here's the question. Why is the sukkah doesn't have any holiness? It holds us.
So the
It
answer
holds
is,
us. We are holy too.
right. So the answer is that the Gemara is making a distinction between tashmishe mitzvah and tashmishe kedusha. Tashmishe mitzvah are the things that are used for a mitzvah. Tashmishe kedusha are things to accommodate something that has intrinsic holiness. So the panels of wood that you use to build a sukkah, while it is sukkahs, right, there is a kedusha in the sukkah. But the wood itself, after sukkahs, was not something that was used to hold something that is itself holy.
So it's just to facilitate a mitzvah.
It's to facilitate a mitzvah, not to serve a actual object of holiness. Okay? And so that's the difference. Okay. Omarava, another
difference between the tefillin and the tefillin bag.
Right. So the tefillin, the tefillin bag, we said, the tefillin bag are also tashmishe kedusha, because the tefillin is kadosh, and the bags are tashmishe kedusha. It's not just tashmishe mitzvah. Okay. We said that, for example, the tzitzis, right, that are hanging on the garment, once they become detached, right, that's tashmishe mitzvah. But the tefillin themselves are holy. The kedusha, so the bags that they're in become tashmishe kedusha. They're holding something that is holy. So therefore, you can't just discard them. Okay. Right. The next teaching of Rava. Omar Rava said, "Hi Pirsa devola, a curtain, which means like the prechus that we have on the Arna Kodesh, right? That has become worn out. So what can I do with it? Lemeavde Pirsa lesifrei shari." To make a covering from the Torah for the Torah scrolls, that is permissible. Why? Because the covering possesses the same degree of sanctity as the curtain. But l'chumashin also, but to use it as the cover for a single book of the Torah is prohibited. Okay? Meaning to say as follows. When we say chumash, right, generally, we just think of a chumash the way we refer to chumash today, which means a book that has the 5 books of Moses, right? However, here, Chumash means something else. The books of the Torah are divided into 5, right? Bereshit, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. So, when we refer to a Chumash, in contrast to a Torah, we're saying if you have a scroll that only has the book of Bereshit in it versus an entire Torah scroll, so then that's going to be considered a lower level of Kedusha, because it's not like it's the whole Torah. So therefore, if you have a covering and you want to use it not to cover a whole Torah, but to cover a different scroll that only has the book of Bereshit or Shmos or Vayikra, Bamidbar or Devarim, that would not be possible because that's a lower level of Kedusha. Okay.
The whole Torah, wait a minute. There you have, it said it's the paraychas that you're talking about.
Right. So let's say you have a paraychas for the Aron HaKodesh, right?
Right.
And we're saying that we've already determined that sometimes it's used to cover the Sefer Torah itself. So now, right? So now the
you
question
you can still use it just for a chumash, even if it was from a Sefer Torah.
No, you can use it as a mantle, like as a cover for the Sefer Torah itself, because that would be the same level as the cover for the Aron HaKodesh.
And if you have a worn out mantle for a Sefer Torah,
well, we're not.
You have to bury it.
We didn't get there yet.
Okay.
We didn't get there yet. But we're saying,
sorry,
if you have a worn out, if you have a worn out parayches, right, curtain, you can take that curtain and you can, stitch it up and make it into a cover for the Sefer Torah, because that's the same level of kedusha. But you can't take a small part of it and then use it to just serve as a cover for one sefer. For a chumash, right? Well, right. Again, when we say chumash, we don't mean a printed book here. When we say chumash, we mean an actual parchment scroll, but it's only one sefer. Like Bereshit. So now another ruling for Amar Rava. Rava says, "Hane zvili d'chumashi," sacks that were used for single books of the Torah. the kamtore disifre in cases for Torah scrolls, tashmishe kedusha ninu, they are considered to be accessories of sacred items. V'nignozim, and they must be hidden. In other words, the simplest way to understand this is if we're talking about something like a bookshelf, right? Just, if in 21st century terms, let's say you have a bookshelf upon which you put, scrolls that or Sifrei Torah, and you store them on these shelves, even though it's not an Aron HaKodesh per se, right? Which you'd have the right to ask, well, what are you doing putting a Sifrei Torah if it's not an Aron HaKodesh? But let's say you did, right? So then these bookshelves, right, they need to be nignozim. They need to be buried properly. You can't just do whatever you want with them. In fact, the Gemara Pshita, that's obvious. Why do you need to teach me this?
Rabbi, what's kamtare again, please?
So kamtare, it's a case. It's a case for a Torah scroll. It could be. I'm not sure, but it could be that. Give me a second. So Rashi says it's like an argaz, it's like a box, right? I think that it is possible that there are these, you know how you have Sephardic Sifrei Torah? So the Sephardic Sifrei Torah is one that you can take the scroll out of it and put it back into it. It's a container, right? So this container that you put the Sefer, it's not like the Ashkenazic Sifrei Torah where there's just a Eitz HaChaim and you stitch on the scroll and then you just roll it. These are things that they encase the Torah itself.
Metal encasements. They're metal encasements.
Right. I think that might be what it could be referring to, but I think it refers to that, or these kind of boxes that you were going to use to place the Sifrei Torah on. So in those cases, these things have to be hidden, because now they become direct accessories to the Sefer Torah, and therefore you can't just discard them. So the Gemara asks, maybe isn't that obvious? So he says, no, ma the sema. Perhaps you could have said, Hani lav l'kovid avidon. These sacks, right, and the cases were not made for the honor of the scrolls that they house. Linture ba'alma avide. They were just made to safeguard the scrolls. In other words, when you have a proiches, right, which means like a curtain, so the curtain, right, is made, or the Aron HaKodesh is made not just to safeguard something, but to honor it, to give it more splendor and honor and glory, so that you're showing it honor. But sometimes you have a case which wasn't, perhaps you could think it wasn't made in the honor of it, to honor the Torah, but rather to just protect it. So maybe if something was just created to protect it, so therefore it doesn't attain any sacred status because of their function. Whereas if it was there for to honor the Torah, that it would receive, like for example, right? When you put down a what do you call it? A cover on the bima, right? Why do you put the cover down on the bima before you put the Sefer Torah down? In honor of the Sefer Torah, right? It's not just a protection for the bima. It's in honor of the Sefer Torah, that the Sefer Torah should be placed on something beautiful, right? So likewise, the Aron HaKodesh, it's created in a beautiful way to give honor to the Sefer Torah. However, these particular boxes, in cases perhaps that they're just for the protection of the Sefer Torah, Kamash Malon, that's why Rava came along to teach us that no, that these things do, these objects do attain a level of sanctity, and you can't do whatever you want with them. Okay, so now we're going to tell a story about an Aron HaKodesh. Okay, Hahubei Kanishta. There was a shul, the Yehudai Ramai. It was of the Roman Jews, right? The have a psiach lahu idroina, and it opened into this chamber, another room. The have a machis beimes, in which there was a corpse lying there. And there were Kayanim at the time who wanted to come into shul to daven, but they couldn't, because once you have a room that opens into another room, so then the tumah spreads into the other room. So they didn't know what to do. The Kohen didn't want to come and daven. Also, they came.
Not with the same roof.
Huh?
Not with the same roof.
Yeah, I had the same question. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't know. All the places we go where we have Levi's now, they have a room next to it where the Kohanim can be. You can have an open door, I think. No,
there's an actual separation. There's a small space.
There's a wall.
Right. No, not just a wall. It's not under the same roof.
Right.
It's not under the same roof. So,
but if the door is open, I think it's fine because it's not under the same roof.
Right. That's correct.
Okay, that's all. You were saying that there's a room next to it, and if the door is open, they can't be.
Correct.
That's why I asked about the roof.
So one second. Let me just see Rashi over here for a second. This idroina was a specific room for which they would put the dead. One second. Yeah, but he doesn't tell me. I had the same question. I'm gonna have to look into it more afterwards.
So that my question was good. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Good question. So they came to Rava and they said, "What should we do? Right? What should we do?" The Kohen didn't want to come into daven, but there's a mess in this other room. There's a corpse in the other room, and so therefore they can't come into daven. What should we do? Amalahu, he said to them, "Delu tevusa usavuha." He said, "Lift the ark of the Torah and put it down in the doorway." So now it closes up the whole entrance, right? Because the ark is a wooden utensil that is designed to remain stationary. So now there's a whole discussion, right, with regards to what can serve as a
Separation.
A separation for Tuma and what can't. Things that are movable, right? So things that are movable, you cannot use it. Things that are not movable, right? When you have a kli eitz that is not movable, which means to say it is usually only used to remain stationary, then if it is blocking, then it prevents the tumor from coming through. So we're saying, kli eitz ha'osu lenachas ena mekabel tumah. Rava explained that a wooden utensil that is designed to remain stationary is not susceptible to tumah, and consequently it acts as a barrier for the tumah. And so that's what he suggested that they should do. So now,
Rabbi, how can you use a Sefer Torah to do that?
An Aron HaKodesh. Well, again, he's trying. People are coming and they want to daven. The problem is that there is tumah, right? So he is saying that you know.
You move the Aron Kodesh, you won't have a problem.
What Ezra's asking is how could that's disrespectful to the.
You're not using the Torah. You're not using the Torah.
No, but even the Aron Kodesh.
I mean,
all right, but you're davening. You're davening anyway.
Kodesh, aren't you using the word Kodesh in the name?
Right.
It's Aaron,
right.
It's a different thing. So why are you saying Aaron Kodesh? If it's Aaron Kodesh, how can you do that? You're being mevazeh the Aaron.
The Aaron Kodesh. Okay.
So right. So on the one hand, on the other hand, what we're saying is that the Aaron HaKodesh being put in this place prevents the tumor from coming through, because it itself will not be Makabel Tumah. So it's not as if it is Makabel Tumah, but it prevents everything else from not being Makabel Tumah. It itself won't be Makabel Tumah either. Perhaps that could explain why it's not a bizoyin of the Aron HaKodesh. But either way, as you'll see in a moment, his peers, Rava's peers, clarified to him the scenario, and he ends up changing his position. Amru le Rabbana le Rava, the rabbis turned around to Rabbi and says, but there are times when they do move the ark when they need to place the Sefer Torah scroll upon it. So therefore, sometimes they take the actual Aron itself and they move it to where they need it so that they could put the Sefer Torah down on the Aron HaKodesh itself. Again, it's not obviously the Aron HaKodesh that we have today. It must be something that is a lot more portable. So then it falls into the category of a utensil that is moved while both full and empty. And so therefore, it's susceptible to tumah. So basically, to understand what's going on over here is like this. In the pasuk, right? In the pasuk where it talks about what can be makabel tumah and what cannot be makabel tumah. So there you have a discussion about a sack, for example. A sack is moved when it's empty or when it's full. So therefore, we say about a kli'et, if it's going to be moved when it's empty or when it's full, right? Only then will it be susceptible to tumah. So what they're saying is that this Aron HaKodesh, they do actually move it when they need it, and so therefore it will be something that is moved both while full and when it's empty. So therefore it would be similar to the sack, and since it's similar to the sack, it can be makabel tumah. And so therefore your suggestion isn't going to work because it won't serve as a barrier for the tumah. So Yihachi lo yafsha. So Rava accepts and he says, if that's the case, if it doesn't remain in one place, as you say it doesn't, so then it's not possible to use it to seal off the entrance to the chamber with it. Okay, so that was one story. Amma Mazutra says, mitbechos svarim shebalu. If you have the wrappings of the Sifrei Torah, right, or the Tanakh that became worn out and you can't use them, they can be made into shrouds for a mes mitzvah, which is an unintended corpse. And this is their best way to bury them with respect. Now, why? What's the svara behind it? The svara is the logic behind it is that these coverings belong to who? They belong to the community. Since they belong to the community, you can't just do whatever you want with it. However, a mes mitzvah is a mitzvah that is incumbent upon the entire community. And since it's incumbent upon the entire community, this is an appropriate use of these covers that are used for these svarim.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Rabbi, question.
Yeah.
Okay, we know that these things are of different colors. We know that tachichin are normally white. So
Right.
how do you reconcile A with B?
So the answer is that when it comes to a mes mitzvah, a lot of things change because the tachrichin is usually what we create for family members, etc. But when it comes to a mes mitzvah where there are no family members, he doesn't have anything of his own, and we are the ones that need to supply it. So if you want to be extra careful to get exactly what the custom is, then you pay for it. But if no one's paying for it, it's coming from communal funds. So then we make an exception and we say that we need to anyway. We need to bury these covers of the Torah, and these covers of the Torah are holy, and they're going to be used for a mitzvah. So we make an exception. But you're right. Generally speaking, tachrichim are white, but here we make an exception because it's a mes mitzvah. We make an exception. It's not the norm. You're right. It's not the norm, but it seems that we make an exception. I didn't see anything written about that. I didn't see anybody comment on that. I didn't see anybody comment on that particular point. But you are right that generally they are white. But I'm assuming that here they make an exception.
But Rabbi,
Yeah.
isn't that going down in kedusha
In what way?
from the kisui for the Torah to
So
to a geniza.
Because you're using it for a mitzvah, it seems that we're no longer going to use it for anything else. What we're trying to do now is discard of it in a respectful way. That's what
Bury it. You
we're
mean
trying to
geniza.
bury it. Right. So here, the best way to bury it would be to use it to honor a mess.
Okay, to facilitate that.
But what we're doing here now is we're burying it. We're not we're not making it for like a cover for a Sefer Torah, if you know what I mean. We're burying it now. Okay, so V'amar Rava, and Rava says like Sefer Torah Shabbalah. What do we do with the Sefer Torah that became worn out, that you can no longer use it and it has to be buried? You should hide it, meaning bury it next to a Torah scholar. That's the best way to bury it. Even if this scholar is not somebody who was bucky in the whole Torah, but he was only a student of the plain laws like Mishnah, right? And he wasn't completely fluent in all the brises, etc. Nevertheless, he's considered to be a Talmud Chacham enough for you to bury a Sefer Torah with him. Omer Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says all of this is fine and good. However, it should be ubechli cheres. The Torah scroll itself should be put into an earthenware container. Why? Because we want to prevent its deterioration in the earth. Shenema, like it says, this is in Yirmiyahu, where Hashem told Yirmiyahu that he should go and he should purchase land, and he should have a shtar, and he should take the shtar, this document, right, which was on parchment, and he should put it into a kli cheres in order to be able to preserve it. So we see that putting it into earthenware preserves the scrolls. So too, when it comes to the Sefer Torah, we need to put it into these earthenware, like it says in the pasuk, Shenem, like it says, "Unasatam b'chli cheres l'man yamdu yamim ravim." You shall put them, meaning these documents with which you purchased this property, this land, should put them into earthenware vessels so that they last a long time. So that's why Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov says, yes, you bury it with a Talmud Chacham, but you should put it into some kind of earthenware vessel. I'm not sure whether that's what they do today, but nevertheless, that's what Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov says. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
does the earthenware have any kedusha to it?
Does the
Once-
earth
once
have any
it's all-
kedusha? Well, if you learn from what we discussed earlier, where we asked, why did Rava tell me that these cases need to be hidden, right? And we said that even though it's only used really for protecting and not so much for the honoring, nevertheless, we said that it has to be given a certain level of, it does get some level of kedusha, and the answer would be that yes, it does. It does get some level of kedusha, and what we're doing at the moment is we're burying it. So we're not talking about using them afterwards for any other use that would be would not be a respectful use of it.
Can it also be put? Can the earthenware vessels? Can they be put in a Aron Kodesh?
Well, no, we're talking about bury. We're talking about when we're burying a Sefer Torah, we take these earthenware vessels and we put them into the ground. That's it. Once you buried it, it's not going to be dug up anymore.
Okay.
Where does that sentence come from, Rabbi?
It comes from Yirmiyahu.
Because
Yeah.
there it's spelled with a shin and regularly it's spelled with a samach.
I'm not sure what you're for. Oh, okay.
Yes.
It's interchangeable. It's interchangeable.
Okay.
Okay. So now, question is, when a person, for example, sells something, what do we do with the money that you receive from the sale? Omar of Papi, Mishmei the Rava. She says, to take a shul and then sell it, and then make it into a yeshiva, like a Torah study hall. Sorry, that is permitted. But to take a base medrash and turn that into a shul, also that's not permitted, because according to this version, right, it would be that we say that a base medrash is of greater sanctity than even a base knesset. Rav Papa, in the name of Rava, teaches the opposite. In other words, Rav Papa taught that it's the base medrash may be made in a shul, but the shul cannot be made into a base medrash. So the Gemara tries to resolve the conflict by saying as follows: Amar Rav Acha said. At this point, we turn to Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Kvasei the Rav Papi. He said this in the name of Rav Papi, that Mistabra. Let me repeat that. I'm sorry. Rav Acha said, Kvasei the Rav Papi Mistabra. The position of Rav Papi makes most sense. Makes most sense. That you cannot go from a base medrash down to a shul, that the base medrash is of greater sanctity. Why? Why does that make most sense? Because Rabbi Shub Levi says, base knesses, mutar la'aseh base medrash, that a shul, you can make it and convert it into a base medrash. So Shema now, let's learn from here that Rav Papi's position is the correct version, and that's really the halacha, that the base medrash, that the shul can be converted into a base medrash, and not the other way around. So now Dorish Bakapara expounded, my dichsiv, what does it mean when it says as follows? This is a pasuk from Malachim. It says, Vayisreif es beis Hashem, ves beis hamelech, ves kol batei Yerushalayim, ves kol beis godel saraf be'eish, and he burned the house of Hashem, and the king's house, and all the houses of Yerushalayim, and every great house, it calls it a great house, did he burn with fire. So now, what do all these things refer to? All these titles and terms, what do they refer to? So Bar Kapara explains the meaning of each phrase. Beis Hashem, Zeh Beis Hamikdash. All right, the house of Hashem refers to the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamelech, that's simply Eila Palatin Shamelech. This refers to the king's palaces. Ves Kol Batei Yerushalayim Kemashma. All the houses of Jerusalem is understood in this plain meaning, the houses of Jerusalem. Ves Kol Base Godel Tzaraf Ba'esh, and every great house did he burn with fire. What does that mean? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. There's a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi as to what the base Godel means. Chad Amar one says, Mokem shemegadlin boy Torah. He says it refers to a place where they augment Torah, it meaning the base of Medrash. And one says, it's a place where they augment prayer, which means the shul. So he says like this: the one who says that God refers to Torah study, like says in the pasuk, Hashem chavis l'man tzidkoi yagdil Torah v'yadeh, that Hashem desires because of his righteousness to increase Torah. So the yagdil, the godel, the increasing of Torah is associated with the word godel, like yagdil. So therefore he says, when it says in the pasuk, when it's called base godel, every great house, right, it refers to the base medrash. Oman the Omat Tefillah, the one who says that godel referred to in that verse refers to tefillah, like it says, saperna, relate to me now, hagdolos asher asa Elisha, the great things that Elisha has done. And here he also uses the term great, godel, right, hagdolos, Elisha. And when Elisha did his great miracles, the Asi Barach Mehu David, he did it through his prayers. So therefore, it must be referring to a house of prayer, and that's why Rabbi Shub ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan argue as to what it means. Now, trying to figure out whether or not. 1 second. So identifying who is the author of each interpretation. Tistayim, let us conclude. right, and infer that Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, who the Amma Makrush Megadlim B'Yatera, that he says that the word Gadol refers to the base of Medrash, the place where you lift up the Torah, where you make the Torah greater by discussing it and learning it. Why should we assume that Rabbi Shimon ben Levi is the author of that opinion? The Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, because Rabbi Shimon ben Levi said, base hakeneses mutar la'aseh base of Medrash, that a shul you can convert it into a study hall, which means that the study hall has a greater level of sanctity. That's the Gadol that's referred to in the pasuk Shema Minah. So we can indeed learn from here that was the view of Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, and so therefore Rav Papi, so therefore Rav Acha says that Rav Papi's version of this teaching that you can take a shul and turn it into a base knesset is probably the most correct version, because it accords
a
with
shul is a bet knesset.
Huh?
A shul is a bet knesset.
Yeah, but you can take the base medrash and turn it into a base knesset.
Okay, you said a shul. You said a shul into a bet knesset.
I'm sorry, I'm tired. So you take the base knesset and you convert it into base medrash. That's what he's saying. Okay. Going a little bit further, Mishnah had said, Avol machru Torah, if you sold a Torah, layichus farim, you cannot purchase books of Tanakh, right? Because that is a lower level of Kedusha. So now they want to know, well, what about, you see, what we're going to discuss over here is as follows. It becomes clear from all of this that you cannot go down in level. You can only go up in level. But what about when there's nowhere further to go up, right? Can I sell something of the highest holiness, like a Sefer Torah, to buy another Sefer Torah? Another Sefer Torah is not lower than a Sefer Torah, but it's also not higher. So is it possible or is it not possible? Is it permitted or is it not permitted? That's the question the Gemara is going to ask. They asked, Mahu limker Sefer Torah yoshan likach by chadash. What's the law with regards to selling an old Sefer Torah in order to buy a new one? So, what's the question? Given the lemalei also, maybe you could say that since you're not going up in Kedusha, so therefore it's prohibited. Or perhaps you could say, even the you can't go any higher. There's no other higher kedusha. Therefore, it's permissible to sell the Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah. Right. So that's the question of the Gemara. You could argue both ways. So the Gemara says, Toshabam, let's come and learn from what it says in the Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, in our Mishnah, Machru Torah, if you sold the Sefer Torah, you cannot buy books of scripture. What's the implication? What's the implication from that? So, Svarim Hudalai, you can buy books of Nevi'im and Ksuvim, which are of less sanctity. Ha Torah, but to buy a Torah, Shabbatami, that would be permissible. So we want to infer from the Mishnah itself that when it comes along and says what you cannot do, you infer that if the other things were not mentioned, then you can do. It says you cannot buy something lower, but something of the same level, then possibly you could. So the Gemara says, no. Masnisin the Avad. We could say that our Mishnah is saying like this. If you've already sold it, the question is, now what do you do with the money? But, Kikah, Mibayalan, our question here is, Lechatchila, whether you can initially sell a Torah scroll to buy another Torah scroll. Maybe you could infer from our Mishnah that if you already sold it, right, then you cannot buy other scrolls, but you could buy a Torah scroll. But lechatchila, because you're not going up, you shouldn't sell it. You should never sell it. So the Gemara says, so that Mishnah hasn't helped us to answer the question, because although you may infer that it may be, you may purchase another Sefer Torah, it seems that that's only that one could argue that that's only after the fact. But we're trying to figure out what to do in the first instance. So the Gemara says, okay, yeah.
What if we sold the Torah and we have to add money to buy another Torah? That other Torah is more expensive than new one.
Right, but the question is,
Can we do that?
so that's the question. That's the question of the Gemara. The question isn't about buying. The question is, can you sell it with that intention?
Okay.
The question is, for what purpose am I given permission to sell a Sefer Torah? That's the question. Okay. Toshima, so you know what? Let's learn from another brisa. Stored in the brisa. Goylil in Sefer Torah, b'mitbachos chumoshin. You can wrap a Torah scroll in the wrappings of single books of the Torah. V'chumoshin mitbachos neviim uksuvim. And you can wrap single books of the Torah in wrappings of books of the prophets and the writings. But you cannot wrap books of the prophets and the writings in the wrappings of single books of the Torah, nor single books of the Torah in the wrappings of the Torah scroll. Okay, so now, what do we say? What we've been saying in this brisa now is that if I have a cover for something of lesser kedusha, I can take that and use it for something for greater kedusha. But if I have a cover for a Sefer Torah, I cannot use the cover for something lower. So now, what can I learn from this? So Ketana Mihas, the Brisa teaches that what Gel in Sefer Torah, that you may wrap a Torah scroll in the wrappings of a single book of the Torah. In with the wrappings of a single Torah, then you are allowed to use it. But perhaps we could learn from here that to wrap a Torah with the wrappings of another Torah scroll, you're not allowed to, right? In other words, I can always go up in Kedusha. I cannot go down in Kedusha. So, right, when it comes to one Sefer Torah to another, although you're not going down, you're also not going up. So when I come along and I say that I can use the covering of a single chumash, right, to cover Sefer Torah, that is permissible because I'm taking something and I'm using it for a higher kedusha. But there in the brisa, it doesn't make any mention of taking from one Sefer Torah and using it for another Sefer Torah. Maybe the reason it doesn't mention it is because the view is that you're not allowed to. Says the Gemara, no, can't use that as a proof because Ema Seifa learned from the concluding part of the brisa where it says Sefer Torah, one may not wrap a single book of the Torah with the wrappings of a Torah scroll. So since it doesn't come along and say, and you cannot wrap one Torah with another Torah, so we're going to imply that you cannot take the cover of a Torah to wrap a single book of the Torah, ha-Torah, but Torah, Shapidami. However, the brisa, since it doesn't say that you can't take from one Torah to wrap another Torah, it doesn't mention that. So therefore, I'm going to imply that it is permissible. So therefore, this brisa is going to be inconclusive because you could try to imply from the beginning one way and from the end another way. Alamaha leka lamishma mina. You cannot bring any proof from this brisa at all because of it being able to interpret it both ways. Okay, so we're back to square one. Can you take one Torah to another or not? In other words, can I sell a Torah in order to buy a new Sefer Torah? Again, the question wasn't just a Sefer Torah. The question was an old Sefer Torah to buy a new one. So you would think like the gut reaction would be, of course you can, right? But it's not so simple. Toshima, so we're trying to get an answer. Toshima, come and learn from this brisa. It says as follows: Menachem Sefer Torah al gabe Torah. One can take one Sefer Torah and put it upon another Sefer Torah. But Torah al gabe chumshin, you could take a single Torah scroll, meaning like chumash gracious, and put it. And you can take a whole Torah scroll and you can put it on another chumash. So what do we have so far? You can take a Sefer Torah and put it on top of another Sefer Torah. You can take a Sefer Torah and you put it on a single scroll. You can take a single book of the Torah and put it on the books of the prophets or the writings. You can't go the other way around. You can't take scrolls of the Nevi'im Ksuvim and put it on a single Torah scroll, right? And not a single Torah scroll al gabe Torah on top of a whole Torah. You can't do that. So now, let's try and learn from this that the fact that I allow you to put one Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah tells me that although you're not going up in Kedusha, but because it's the same Kedusha, it's permitted. Therefore, let's learn from here that I could sell a Sefer Torah in order to buy another Sefer Torah. So then Gemara answers, Hanacha ka'amrat. You want to bring me a proof from placing a Torah on another Sefer Torah? Shiny hanacha, it's different when it comes to placing a Torah on top of another. The efsha, it's not possible any other way because of space constraints. In other words, as follows: there's a whole discussion in the poskim whether one is allowed to put one Sefer Torah on another Sefer Torah. Again, there's a machlekes, so it's inconclusive. The views in both ways. It seems. And I think this is the way it's usually done in practice. The less brera, if you don't have a choice, right? The only way is to put one Sefer Torah on top of another lying down, then you do that. But you try every way you can to avoid that, okay? So if you look inside an Aron HaKodesh, they're never piled up one on top of the other. Each one is standing alone because it's disrespectful to put one Sefer Torah on another. However, the point of the Gemara over here is that even in the case where you would say that due to a lack of space, right, you would be allowed to put one Sefer Torah on another, that can never be used as a source for me to know now that I can buy another Sefer Torah with the proceeds of selling the first Sefer Torah.
But how can you read the Torah if it's sitting on top of the other Torah?
No, we're talking about
to
store them. We're talking about to store them if they're being stored, right?
Stored. Okay.
Right? If you're putting them away, right?
I thought when we take out the two Torahs, if you put one on top of the other.
No, we never do that. We never.
I
do
know.
That.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No, but what I'm saying is, let's say the Aron HaKodesh needs to be refurbished. I don't know, whatever. They need to be refurbished.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And so now you take a table and you're like, I don't have a table, and I don't have the space to be able to set them all up. So in worst case scenario, they'll pile them up one on top of the other. Although it's not ideal to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Try to avoid doing that. Okay. So the Gemara proves that the law of placement allows some flexibility. If you're not going to say so, how do you ever roll a Torah? In other words, like this. When you look at our Torah scrolls, right? How is the Torah scroll made? You have what's called columns, yerios, right? These yerios are stitched one to the other. Now, how do you store them? You store them one on top of the other, because when you're rolling it, right, you're going to have one part of the parchment on top of another part of another part of the parchment. That's the way we do it. It might not be that respectful to put one parchment on top of the other. You don't have a choice. There's no other way. So therefore, the Gemara says this is a clear proof that when there's no choice, there's flexibility. But you can't just derive from this that it's possible in all places, right? In other words, how can you roll up a Sefer Torah? One page is necessarily resting upon the other when you have it stitched in that way. Because it's impossible to any other way. So shari therefore is permitted. Hachanami, so to over here, when we talk about putting one Sefer Torah in another, when we say that it is permitted, it's only given to Efshi, it's not possible in other way, right? So therefore, Shari, we will allow you to do it. However,
Rebbe, are you talking here now about the Urias, or are you talking about after they're stitched? Because even with the Urias, if they're flat sheets, there's a question one on the other. And when you finish one, if it rolls up, then you also have the question, is it the rolling itself?
The rolling
puts one
itself.
on top of the
The
other?
rolling itself will end up having one part of the cloth on top of the other part of the cloth. So therefore, we see over here that it's only because we don't have a choice that we make an accommodation and we allow for it. But you cannot infer from this that you can sell a Sefer Torah for another Sefer Torah. So we're back to square one.
Rabbi, you have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead. You're muted. We can't hear you. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Mark's iPad is muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, is that good?
Yeah,
now we
perfect.
can hear you.
Thank you, guys. Maybe that's why the Sephardic Torahs stand up all the time. They don't lay down each other.
It's still the same problem.
With it when it
Because
comes
when it's rolled, you have each sheet is on top of other sheets.
No,
Doesn't
You're
matter
reading
whether it's
it.
rolled or it's
it's
When
not.
you're reading it,
No, when it's a Sephardic Torah, they're always
they're
standing up.
always standing, right?
yeah, but one sheet is still
No,
on top of another
No,
sheet.
No,
but
but
they're
what-
not on
what he
top of
said-
each
what he
other.
They're not on top. It's one aside the other,
right.
They're on-
right?
No,
That's
They're
interesting.
standing by themselves.
If they're always vertical, then it's always one sheet alongside the other one.
Right.
One
But
is
they're
never
in- but
resting on
each-
it.
except that each sheet is in contact with the other sheets.
That
Yeah.
was
It's not
bad.
separate.
Right, no,
What? Of course it's
it's true,
separate.
but it's a good point.
Because when you roll it, the tightness
They're
of
still
the
standing
rolling
up.
will
No,
make
they're
one
even-
sheet on top of
It-
the other.
It makes one closer to the other.
Well, I don't know. It just sounds good to me. Why
When
you
you-
stand
when you-
up all the
yeah.
time?
No, it's a good point. When you have it lying down, then you're having one on top of the other, one higher than the other. When you have it vertical, even though one is more outer and one is more inner, but nevertheless they're both vertical and standing
Alongside each other.
alongside each other. It's an interesting point.
And make it a
They're
whole.
still touching, sorry. I
No, you're right.
don't
They
agree.
can touch. Who said they
Both of you
can't
guys.
touch? Who says he can't touch?
You know what happens when you can't touch?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so the Gemara
Why
says,
do the Sfarim have it always vertical? Anyone know?
It's a good reason. I don't know.
this might be a good reason. This might be a good reason.
Yeah.
That was the whole point of it.
I think that's the way they show, cover to the Sefer Torah with the bite. That's the hidur of the mitzvah of the Sefer Torah.
That is always vertical. It fits with this.
But even when, Isaac, even when it's vertical, when you roll it, it's one over the other.
Nothing
But
is
that's
ever,
but
it's
that's what
never
I said, and they
over.
don't accept that.
It's never over. It's always one alongside the other. It's one next to the other.
Even
Yeah,
when
but-
they re-roll it.
You can roll it and unroll it 100 times. If they're standing up, you can twist it any way you want. It's never going to be one on top of the other.
Not on top, but it's
Let me
over.
put it to you this way. You're not allowed to put a chumash, right, underneath something else. You always have
A
to
navi.
on top of a Gemara, let's say. But when they're in a bookshelf, standing up vertically next to each other, we don't have that problem. You can
Right.
put it wherever you want, and you can put the Gemara wherever you want. So we see that there's a difference between whether they're lying on top of each other or they're standing next to each other, right? And so I think that's what we're saying over here.
But
Yes.
but and here the Hashem, in the back we have the Tehillim.
Yeah.
And then you have the Torah reading, and then you have the Shacharit reading, and then you have, so it's going up, it's in climbing as it's going on, it's going up in elevation.
Right. So what I've heard with regards to that is because the Siddur has within it Psuke, Tanakh, right? Psukim that come from Chumash as well. So therefore, we're not makpid with regards to a Siddur. because it has all those other psukim as well. So we don't have the same concern. But if it were standalone, just Mishnah, Gemara, whatever, then we wouldn't do that.
Where would you put the siddur? If you have Chumash, Gemara, Mishnah, siddur, where do you put the siddur?
No, so
Wow.
the point here is that
Laying flat. Where does the siddur go?
Maybe page
I would
3.
I would put the siddur underneath the Chumash,
Bottom.
underneath Tanakh, but it could be on it could be together with the Gemara.
I don't think so, because I did that, and 2 different Rebbeim said, no, siddur goes even on top of a Chumash, because I don't know why, because it has everything, like you just said, or whatever it is.
What I'm
Is
saying, what I'm saying is that I wouldn't be makpid if I saw a siddur on top of.
Of a Chumash.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
I know that there are people who say that you could put it on top of a chumash. I personally am not comfortable with it, but I know there are people who say that you can.
I'm not comfortable either, but that's what I was told, is it?
The siddur is made like that. It's on
Right.
top
I
of it.
understand that the siddur is made like that, but to take the siddur,
It shouldn't be. There should be in 4. It should be in 4 pieces. It should be in 4 different books. I mean, it's
Yeah,
right?
but the Chumash that appears in there is only the first, it's not a complete Chumash.
it's
It's
not
not,
a
a
complete
you know,
Chumash.
each parsha
But
is
the
just the
Tehillim
first 3
Right.
aliyot, and that's it.
And
So it's not a
Tehillim also.
complete. So you can say
Alright.
based on that, it's not the same.
Negative.
Remember, I wish you all a wonderful day. We will pick up in Mr. Shem.
Rebbe, where you right? You late for something?
He's
I'm
sitting at
saying-
the door. Look at him.
We have an
He has his
anim-
own- he
oh,
has
okay.
his own-
I know that. Actually, we have an animated conversation. You can leave. You can't leave.
But he has his own, so we're not going to keep him. That's all.
Sei gesund, Rebbe. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
very
Thank
much.
you so
Rabbi.
much, Rabbi. Take
Rabbi.
care.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye
Quick
to
question
everybody.
is, do you know if Rabbi Smith has made any arrangements for less formal learning during the break?
I have no idea, but I can ask him when I see him. But you could also reach out to him, send him a message.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Sei gesund. Thank you, Rebbe.